Welcome to Yelling Into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm your host, Tevin Crody, and joining me as always is my fire alarm. Sorry, Scott, my good friend Scott Daly. Scott, the fire's a haste buff, right?
Oh yeah, no, we talked about how good haste feels last week, and that's what the fire does. That's what the burning. That's what it feels like.
Well, so speaking of last week and coming into this week, there's not really been much in the way of news for WoW. Retail, beta, Cata, some stuff came out today. So for anybody listening to this in the future, it's currently the 9th of July. So some stuff came out later today. So I guess we'll touch on that a little bit.
Yeah,
But
we need like a breaking news jingle to play, like.
what we need to do is we need to just call up like Blizzard and be like, what are these blue posts, guys? Like, I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but one of the blue posts that came out today was, hey guys, retail season 4 is ending sometime.
Why didn't you pick a day before you announced that, guys? Instead of just say, hey, it's soon.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that.
So I don't know really what's going on right now with the retail game, because in the post they said get ready for the next few weeks, but weeks away is also like the expansion. The War Within's just over a month away at this point, so
Yeah,
it feels weird.
my current guess is that pre-patch is on the 30th, Tuesday the 30th. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. So that's 3 weeks from today. So that would fall under line of that, and that would give how many weeks? 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. That would be a month until release. So that feels right to me.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that that's the case. I mean, if I remember correctly, and I could just be completely wrong, we're still able to do keys into the pre-patch. It's just potentially outside the season, right?
Yeah, I think that's how it was in Shadowlands as well, because I remember they brought in the new talent system in the pre-patch.
Mhm.
And I ran keys because I was like, oh my god, disc priest, it's cool now. And I ran keys as a disc, and I thought it was awesome. I was so bad at it, but it was awesome. So yeah, I think that's true. It's just going to be the season 4 keys over again, but there's not going to be score or probably vault even. I don't. Well, maybe there'll be vault, but there won't be like score or any of that stuff at that point.
Well, hopefully we'll get some of those new things in, because you and I tried to hop on WoW the other day, and I don't know, you log in and it doesn't. I like the argument that it feels like this is for nothing. I always hate that argument, because like at the end of the day, no matter how you boil it down, some way or another, you're just going to get to the point of this feels like it's for nothing. But like, I don't know, with pre-patch coming out and not really pushing in season 4,
Yeah.
it just feels weird to get onto the game right now.
Yeah, I mean, we did a key, and literally it was just like me saying, I need to practice tanking because I'm not good at it. So let me do a 2, which halfway through the key, I was like, wait a minute, this is stupid. I'm not learning anything because it's a 2. Nothing's really
like
hurting
max
me.
gear.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I don't know. Let me ask you a question. Does it feel weird that the expansion is 2 months away? Because it doesn't feel like we're on the cusp of an expansion. And maybe it's just because I haven't been playing retail like at all that it doesn't feel that way. But like, it's just like, oh, like I think that the realization that we had earlier this week of like, oh yeah, pre-patch is gotta be weeks away was like,
Mhm.
wow, it doesn't seem like, it feels like beta just started. And I know that it didn't, but it feels like it just started.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like in part of this, I don't necessarily think we have like a shorter beta cycle or anything than we normally do, but with currently like season 4, I mean, you can look at the numbers. There were some new numbers posted today. It's pretty low in terms of people actually playing.
Yeah.
So I think there's not a ton of hype around the game right now, but also we have this new model that they're trying to shift to, where we're doing, instead of 2-year long expansions, they want to do like a year and a half and essentially cut down on some of the season 4 stuff is what they've That's what's been floated around, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of that's confirmed yet, but they've said it multiple
Well,
times.
to be fair to Blizzard, I don't think they've ever actually said in an interview the goal is to do an expansion every 18 months. I think where that comes from is they basically said they want to finish this whole World Soul Saga thing by like 2030, I think the idea
Yeah,
was, and people just like mathed out how when the expansions would have to release in order to be done with the World Soul Saga by 2030. And so they
yeah.
just made a guess that, oh, we're going to do these faster cycles, and we might, right? I don't know. I don't think they're ever going to make definitively say that. But yeah, no, it does feel weird, and I don't know if it's because of the Pandaria stuff or just, I think honestly what I think it is that season 4 was just so lame that it's just like I'm so out of touch with World of Warcraft right now, at least on the retail front, that the idea that there's a an expansion coming
I
hasn't
almost
doesn't feel real.
it makes me wonder too. Like we've been blasted with so much wow stuff
Hmm.
recently. Like Season of Discovery, Plunder Storm, Classic, hardcore stuff, and now Mr. Pandaria, and it just like maybe that's why too, because it's like we still haven't felt like we've been able to breathe since the last thing that they decided to release.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I mean, it's only been like what 2 months, if that, since Cata released Cata Classic.
Yeah, I think this is week 6 or 7 of the raid. And the raid came out like a week later. So yeah, I think that that checks. Yeah, which is
So
wild.
yeah. But anyways, so WoW news aside, we're gonna get into some of the affix stuff. There is a small disclaimer. We've talked about Season of Discovery a little bit here. It is the 9th on the 11th of July. So in 2 days from our recording of this, Season of Discovery Phase 4 is going to drop. So Scott and I really only played Season of Discovery Phase 1. We did the raid in that for a few weeks with a group of friends, but we've kind of petered off of Season of Discovery. And for myself, mainly that was because I don't know it. To me, what I wanted Season of Discovery to be, so like a little bit of background. I play RuneScape. I play both the new version of the game and old school. And for those who are informed with old school RuneScape, essentially they rolled back the servers to how they were in 2007, and they've been receiving content updates, but not just re-going through the same update path that they did before. That's what I wanted Season of Discovery to be. I always knew it wasn't going to be that, but that's why like I had really high hopes that maybe that's where we were going to go. And I don't know. I noticed that it wasn't going that way. It wasn't necessarily any more fun than like vanilla was the last time I played it around. So
Yeah.
I kind of fell off pretty hard after phase one.
Yeah, I kind of realized before I even got to level 25 that this was not a thing for me. I made it. I made it to level 25 and I did that first raid. But I was trying mage healer, and I think maybe that was part of my mistake. Is because I just think at that level it didn't feel very good to be a mage.
Mhm.
It didn't feel good. I didn't have enough abilities. I just didn't enjoy it. And man, I don't know. Obviously, everyone like was talking about how this was going to be Classic Plus, and people were hoping this was going to be Classic Plus, and I knew it was never going to be Classic Plus. And like I've followed what's happened in Season of Discovery since I bounced off of it, and like it seems like people do not like it. I mean, we'll see how this first phase is, or this fourth phase rather, is received, but no, I like it felt like it was the hype was way up here, and then with each phase it dropped and dropped, and people were very unhappy with the game in phase 3 with the Sunken Temple raid. um you know, I don't know, like I the way I feel about these games is they've continued to make the game better, as it's gone on is that like like I think there's a lot of times there's a lot of nostalgia with classic and with the
Yeah.
vanilla version of the game, and like this is the way it used to be, and there was something cool about that. And it's not like I disagree in some senses. Like I've gone back and played the original EverQuest on, like, they have a thing there called Project 99, which is just like a locked server state of when EverQuest was in the year 1999. um and I've messed around on there for a while, and there is like a sense of like fun and like, oh my god, like this, I remember what this was like and the challenge of it, and how the game sucks, frankly. But that wears off on me really quickly, and then it's just like, this is boring and I don't want to do it this way anymore. They've fixed every complaint I have. That's honestly a lot of the way I feel about Cata Classic as well. I'm enjoying my time with that game, but it's like, oh, this particular thing is really frustrating. Oh yeah, that's why they fixed it in later versions of the game, and this isn't a problem in retail. Um,
Yeah.
so I
I'll
mean,
never
it.
forget. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'll never forget when we were leveling at the end of Wrath, and we were like going through dungeons, and you're tanking, and you're like, I just can't get aggro.
Hmm.
And then we look, and it's like, oh yeah, the vengeance changes came out in Cata. They just
Yeah,
like fixed tank aggro in Cataclysm.
yeah.
It's shocker. They just like made something less annoying.
Yeah, especially I was playing Bear, who, Bear was a good tank in Wrath, but like in Heroics, they just sucked at AoE threat. Like all you could do was swipe. That's it. You like swipe, and then every 2 minutes you could berserk, which allows your mangle to hit 3 targets. It's like, hooray! I can hold aggro on 3 targets. The rest of them I'm fucked. Um, so yeah, it was really frustrating, and then bam, overnight it's fixed, and it's like, oh yeah, this was an improvement in the game. Actually,
Mhm.
objectively, the game is better now. So yeah, I mean, I get the sentimentality, and it's fun to see people like enjoy the hardcore game. It's fun to see people enjoy like fresh classic. Like I enjoy from a distance watching those people enjoy it, and I will probably like watch some streams when Season of Discovery comes out and be like, oh, what are the changes they did to Molten Core like? That'll be fun to see people experience that kind of stuff. But yeah, as something that I myself want to commit a lot of time and effort to, I just am not interested at all. At all.
Yeah.
I think the rune system is a fun idea, but essentially it's just like, how do we sneakily introduce retail abilities into classic characters? And at that
That's
point, I'm like,
what it was in season one, dude.
like, what are we doing? Like, why? Like, what's the point anymore? So yeah, I mean, I really never thought that. I just, going into that BlizzCon, I was like, I just don't think they're ever going to do something called Classic Plus. I mean, I think the reason why they support Classic in general so much is because it's relatively easy and cheap to do, and they make a lot of money off of it. And then suddenly you tell them that, oh, by the way, you're going to have to do a substantial amount of development time to like design entirely new raids and things like that. And it's just like, I don't think they're ever going to do that. I think this is the closest they ever got to doing that. And I don't know, maybe one day if they realize there's like boatloads of money in it, they'll take the time to do that. But I think they're watching the way the community has reacted to this and how passionately some of them hated every little bit of tinkering and changing they've done. And it's like, is this worth it? I don't know if this is worth it.
So, with all of the season of Discovery stuff out of the way, the next new thing that kind of came in today was the affix changes that they're doing for the level 2 bucket affixes, the Zalateth affixes.
Yep.
So last week we were talking about how it was really weird how this affix where you have to use stops to interrupt all these orbs, and it just puts all these nameplates and everything on your screen. Um, that's, I guess, kind of been changed. They've reduced it by half. Um, the only thing that I don't know, and maybe they said this in the post and I didn't read it well enough, but is everything going to be giving you 2% haste now? Or are we just now only getting 10% haste?
They did not say in the post, so I would assume that they did not change how much haste it's giving. I would assume it's just going to give you less haste, which does kind of suck a little bit. I will say sometimes it's nice to just be told explicitly that we were right. It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling when the game comes out and says, Scott, You specifically were correct about your opinion about this thing, because I think it does, like, I agree, it's still not how I would have done the affix, but dropping the number in half, I think, reduces the amount of stops you're going to need, and it makes it so much easier to manage from a visual perspective and from a number of stops perspective. Actually, the most annoying thing about the affix, and we didn't even talk about this last week, is that they come out in like batches of 5, right? So it'll be 5, then 5, then 5, and then 5.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you time it correctly, you can rip your AoE stop, and you won't get all 20, but you could maybe get like 10 or 15. I think with this change, unless they lower the amount of batches they come out in, it is very easy for one AoE stop to get both of them, because you get one will be right before their cast goes off, the other one will have spawned, and you can get both groups at once. Bam. That's a lot easier to handle.
Are they gonna spawn close enough though? Because they did spawn somewhat spread out when it was 20.
Yeah. I don't
So
know. I don't know if they spawn on enemy mobs or if they spawn on players. I'm not sure about that.
yeah. So I don't know. I still think the affix is a little weird given the amount of stops and everything that you're gonna need in these dungeons.
Yeah.
But it's better. And I can wholly acknowledge it's better. And it like their reasoning for it is like almost like you said, it's almost cathartic. Like we realized that we said one thing and then did a different thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
And I do hope it's still 20% haste, because I think the feel of 20% haste is just substantially better finger feel than 10% haste.
Yeah, yeah. So the other one was the like pseudo raging. And they essentially said this doesn't really feel like a Zealotith affix, and it almost feels more punishing because it's passive, as well as it doesn't give you that immediate feedback. So that last part is specifically what you were calling out last week, Scott.
Right.
So
2 for 2, baby. We're doing it.
I'm really hopeful that the replacement that they've brought in is going to give that feedback. The thing is they're not they've removed this one from beta testing. The raging one. So is it going to be removed? Period, or is it going to be reworked? Because if it's being removed, period, we've only got 2 affixes still. Like,
Yeah, I mean, the one thing they haven't said, and I think the reason they're not saying this is because they're not sure, is how many affixes are going to be in this weekly rotating bucket. I think just thinking about it, it logically makes sense that there would be 4, because then you're doing a monthly rotation, and that feels right. But yeah, I don't know. Like, we got a new affix today. Was this like the plan was we'll bring 2 in this week, and then a couple weeks later we'll bring the 3rd in, and then we'll bring the 4th in? Or was, oh, everyone hated Frenzied, we have to throw a new one out there, here you go, here's this new one? I don't know. And I think they're not going to say until they've made a definitive decision themselves. Like, I bet you their internal build has probably like 5 or 6 different types of affixes they're tinkering with, and it's just like the ones that they are feeling good enough are rising to the top and getting pushed out to the thing we're playing. Yeah, I think 2 would be weird, and like we already have a alternating affix every other week, right? Like, that's the tyrannical fort thing, right? um
mhm.
so I don't think we need it would be weird if there were 2 of them now, that like, because I mean, the other thing that would happen is, like, in a 2 key, you would never get the opposite affix. Like, you could never get Fort Voidbound and Fort Ascended, right? Like, it would always be one of those would be linked to the other, and the other would be linked to the other if they each change every week.
Or yeah, I was gonna say,
Although,
or you'd have to have like back to back.
and maybe they don't care about that, because at a high enough key level, you're getting both those affixes anyway. What is it, a 10 that you get Fort and Tyrannical in one?
Yeah,
Um,
10 you get fort and tyrannical, and 12 you lose all affixes, but the death one
mhm.
where you take 15 seconds, and then the new affix that just everything's 20% harder.
Wait, how do so if they have 4 of this too, is there going to be a way to ever get one of those like on both tyrannical and fortified in a season?
They would have to do like a shorter rotation to
Yeah, yeah.
switch it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing the math for me. I'm not a math. So, yes, when you have two even numbers, those even numbers can never switch because that's not how even numbers work. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like
S-
something. So maybe it will be almost that says to me almost that um, they need an odd number in this bucket, right?
Yeah, I would think so. The only thing is like I wonder how much thought they're actually putting into that because like you said, we're gonna get Fort and Tyrant every week once you get to a certain key
Yeah.
level. So
Yeah,
I don't
ultimately,
know.
how much do they care about the 210 experience at that level of like giving that making sure those different combinations happen?
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I would say like if it isn't 4, I can't imagine it's much more. So it should be like 5. I don't know. I think if you go too low, then you get yourself into this situation to where like if one of them sucks, now you're like really screwed because one, let's say it's 3, 1/3 of the time you're just spent doing something people don't like doing.
Hmm.
So, um, anyways, oh, there is a new affix, Void Bound. I think it's
Yes,
what it's
void
called.
bound. Yep.
Uh, Essentially, if anybody played during the Queen Ashara thing, there were the like empowered enemies that empowered everything around them. Not necessarily the same thing, but more or less it is. Initially, when this first came out, they didn't have an explanation like Blue Post, and people were playing around with it on the beta and just like didn't know what to do. It sounds like now from their Blue Post that you want to kill this enemy and then you get a buff for 20 seconds, a 20% crit buff, which that's 20%. So maybe haste will still be 20%.
Yeah, and maybe we're gonna have 4 affixes, and they're all gonna buff our major secondaries, and that's what we're gonna do. So
Yeah.
the 20% verse, 20% mastery. Although that like with the way mastery works, I don't even know how you do that.
Yeah. Mastery would be weird. They'd have to do a flat like
Yeah.
value for mastery or something.
Um, Yeah, this is an interesting one. So I was watching people play with this. I haven't gotten a chance to play it myself because, like we said, breaking news. Um, it looked like so there were multiple things that were happening. It looked like there was a shield that the mob spawns in. It has a shield on it, and then it starts casting a spell and channeling the spell onto the enemies around them. Those enemies get a stacking damage buff, which we'll talk about that in a sec. Uh, but it looked like you had to break the shield and then you could kill the mob like immediately. Like you break the shield and it essentially dies. But there was when it first rolled out, you could purge the shield off and it would just instantly die, and then you get the buff. I think they fixed that, and in the process of them trying to fix that, they made it so the mob was unkillable and you just couldn't do anything to it. But I think
Mhm.
essentially there is a shield that it will put on itself. You have to DPS down the shield as quickly as possible while it's channeling. The second you break the shield, the buff drops from the enemies, and you get a 20% crit buff. I think is how it works. Um,
Okay.
I don't hate it. I am worried about this thing that they said about extra, like they made this whole post about how they didn't want to introduce extra mechanics during boss fights. That was their big that bucket of affixes that lasted exactly a week and then they threw them in the garbage. Were like, we don't want to do anything that changes uh dealing with boss mechanics. And now they've have two affixes in this bucket that both have things that will pop up during boss mechanics, which in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing unless like the big mob spawns at the same time you have a DPS check on the boss. So so like
Or, yeah. The other thing too is like it's going to turn things that don't one shot you into things that do one shot you.
Yeah, and
Right.
the vision
Potentially.
and the clarity of that, like knowing that, like, oh, in a normal situation, I can not use my defensive on this ability because I know it will not kill me. But now I have to be tracking another buff. We're talking about like tracking buffs on nameplates is a thing that they didn't want you to do more of, and now we have to be very specifically tracking this buff on the nameplates. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a
They'll just
cool.
make it a private aura.
Yeah. I think it's a cool idea. Like, I like it. I think we said last week that like a thing like 20% crit, you're just probably not going to notice as much in gameplay as you will 20% haste. I mean, you might a little bit more because you'll see the big numbers pop up. Um, and everyone likes big numbers, so you'll see these crit numbers pop up, which is always fun. But it will feel less impactful, with the exception of probably some classes in which it will feel extremely impactful that like a lot
Yeah.
of crit.
Things that
Um,
proc off crits and stuff
yeah,
like
yeah,
that, maybe.
yeah. I don't
I
hate
don't
it.
know.
I don't hate it. I would need to see what it's like during like a really tough. Like I'm thinking of like the Iridicron fight where you're burning the shield like very intensely, needing to burn the shield. And there's also, while you're burning the shield, there's also a shit ton of damage going out that the healer's dealing with. And I'm imagining this thing spawn, and it's like the decide between switch to the thing because it's giving a stacking damage buff that's making the healer's job on this phase even harder, but that makes the phase last longer because you're not working on like I can just see scenarios in which this would really really suck. But I also can
Yeah.
see scenarios in which this is very easily dealt with, and it's a little fun to get some extra crit.
Well, I did just look. The article that was posted initially, it looks like there's some footage from Tettle's stream. And it appears that if you try to purge the shield with a single target purge, it currently is removing it.
I think they
I'm
fixed
gonna
that
guess that
already.
isn't intended.
Yeah, there's no
Okay.
way that's intended. Yeah. um
So yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I like you. I don't think this is necessarily inherently a bad affix, but there is cause for concern here. And I mean, WoW isn't always the greatest when it comes to visual clarity anyways,
mhm.
and needing to know all of that more with not even like like you're saying bosses specifically. Some of these trash packs just hurt, man.
No, you're right. You're right.
Like it could just be bad
Yeah.
all around. But again, we don't know. We got to play with it more.
Yeah.
So that's happened. Hopefully, it isn't that big of a deal. I mean, at the end of the day, all of these affixes eventually, for people who are going past level 12 keys, aren't going to matter anyways. So it is what it is, and we will continue to test and see what the feedback is there and go from there.
you, you know what they
The
should do?
only other, huh?
They should have an affix called like Tentacle Town, and it summons a void portal, and you can step into the void portal, and if you do, you grow tentacles all over yourself, and those tentacles increase, like give you a percentage damage increase, but they also hurt you or something. um
I think they should just mass grip mobs on repeat.
that would be fun. That would be fun.
Or
Can
they could make this affix called Awakened, where you
hmm,
go into like an obelisk and you kill a boss, and it puts a portal where the obelisk was, and also where you killed the boss, and you can
interesting.
just like teleport and skip trash.
I would like us to reconsider the Tentacle Town idea, because I think that's a pretty good one.
No, so the only other thing on Wowhead that I just saw when I was pulling this up, so I could get the name of this affix and everything, because my goldfish-sized brain couldn't remember it, was they made some healer changes, which like we knew that they were already going to be increasing people's max health, but apparently they're nerfing percentage-based healing and trying to make it more like sustain healing. I don't know. Their previous iterations of trying to fix this have not gone well.
I
So
don't know what they're doing. So the problem, as I understand it, and I haven't healed in the beta at all, I've only been tanking, is that they increased health pools by a whole lot. Like I think the level 80 average health pool for a DPS is in the several million range. Um and heals feel like single target heals feel shitty with that big of a health pool. And like just this has been like this was a problem all through Dragonflight. They were tinkering with health pool size and amount of direct healing and amount of AoE healing, and like healers feel too powerful. Oh, but their single target doesn't feel. Oh, well, they feel really powerful with cooldowns. So we have to limit their cooldowns. We want to limit like nerf their cooldowns, but now we need to give them reciprocal like single target healing buffs to make up for that. And it's like it just feels like they don't know what they're doing. And
Mhm.
like it's a really weird situation to be in, because I agree, like there are times when as a healer you feel very very powerful, that like you can single-handedly like bring the health pool of your whole raid up instantly by yourself. But then also there's moments where like, as I think every healer that plays this game has said, like what happens is then in order to make a threatening encounter, you need to almost one shot and or one shot people constantly, and that's not fun. Like that's like making healing kind of like Twitch gameplay, where if you don't react immediately, the person's definitely dead because every hit is going to do 90% of their health. So you need to top them immediately. That's not fun. And I just this is honestly, this is part of the reason why I'm exploring tank, because I just don't feel like they have a good handle on what they want to do with healing, how to fix it. And like this
Yeah.
post doesn't give me any comfort in that regard, because I don't know what the fuck they're talking about here. Like it's not a well written post. It's
Yeah.
like I agree with reducing the strength of percentage based heals, because there's some like that's preservation of ochre. I forget what the heal was called, but when they nerfed healing,
Rewind?
yeah, thank you, rewind. When they nerfed healing in season 2, they nerfed like all healing in season 2 except for rewind, and just it made it awesome because they buffed health by a shit ton and then didn't change how that worked, and so suddenly it's doing like shit tons more HPS than anything else. And our guild leaders like walking in with this completely undergeared uh evoker and just beating the shit out of me in heals all of a sudden. No fair, not fair. um so I'm glad that they like did that as part of this change. But yeah, man, like you ask long-term healers and none of them are like really excited about healing in this expansion. Like they're gonna do it because they're masochists, but um it's a really interesting time, and I don't know. Again, I feel like they need to revisit this from the ground up, and it's a real problem of a combination of just the talent system, how damage scales, how health scales, and all these things kind of coming together to create a problem that frankly is not easily solved. Like I completely understand why they've been struggling with this so much, because it's like they keep just having to tinker. Oh, let's try this. Oh, that's not really working. Let's try this. That's not working either. And they don't want to make healers feel useless, because that's not fun either. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. What do you think? I know you don't heal as much in retail, but
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is like if you notice your raid is at 80% health, that shouldn't be cause for concern, and it currently is. Like I think that's the biggest issue that I have with it, right? Like if you look at your raid or your group in a key and they're at, like I said, 80% health, like that's relatively high,
yeah,
but they're in one shot range. I don't know. That just feels not great. So
yeah,
I definitely think that changes need to be made. I don't really know what. It doesn't really seem like they really know what. And hopefully they'll land on something before the expansion comes out. But I have low expectations that that's going to happen. We're probably going to be in the same volatile situation that we are now, where it's like health bars are just a yo-yo constantly going down and then back up and down and back up, and like you have one person who misses or presses their defensive late, and well, now you're just dead because everybody else is taking 90% of their health with their 30% DR and you're just dead. So yeah, I don't know, it's not a great time,
they
I
also
guess
said
is the best.
they're increasing the effectiveness of hybrid healing, which is hilarious to me, because like they like specifically went after that shit hard after season 1 of Dragonflight, because hybrid
Oh, it's just
healing
a year of rep pallies again.
was so good. It was so good. And like that's why you were seeing those high keys without any healer, because like you just get a shadow priest, a rep pally, and a balance druid, and they can just like hit their do damage equals healing buttons and just like fucking heal the whole group up. And so now
Nah,
we're like
man,
we're getting back to that again.
They fixed it. They made it so that you have to have a healer in
in
PI.
TGP. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Problem
Um,
solved. Yeah, man.
but
I don't know. Like I don't envy them this, and like I don't want to make it like we're always hard on this company. We like this game a lot. This is a very difficult problem to solve. It is a very difficult problem to solve. I don't know how
it
they
is.
solve it. I really don't. It's just kind
I
of a
think the saddest thing for me is not their solution to it right now. It's I feel like this was just a post along with the season 4 post. I feel like these are both just posts to have a post this week. Um so I don't necessarily think that we should be putting a lot of stock into it, but it was brought up today. Hopefully it's something they're still thinking about, but that's kind of how I feel about it. Like I'm not trying to read into it too much, mainly just because it almost feels like it's we haven't released content, we haven't talked to people in a week. Here's something for the healers.
Yeah, I mean, they did make changes in the build reflecting this. Like, Resto Druids got like a Swift Men buff by 15%, a Reju buff. So like, there's things that actually in the build that reflect this. So I think they were trying to explain those changes, but it's very confusing to me, and it doesn't.
Mhm.
Again, it doesn't seem like they have a clear vision of what they want it to look like. That, like, the post says, we don't want healing to be any easier or harder than it is now. That we're just adjusting this to be more in line with the increased health pools. It's like, okay, sure, but I think there's like, if your fix right now is just to get it back to the status quo that was Dragonflight, like, that's not a good place actually. Like,
Yeah.
the
People aren't
healers are
happy
not
with that.
happy. Like, a lot of the long-term content creator healers that I've been following forever are playing DPS classes right now. Like, Meg, the Mistweaver, is playing Windwalker. Growl is playing a mage for some reason. And so, like, there's a lot of people that are pretty unhappy with the state of healing in this game. And I know nobody cares because but healers care.
Healers have feelings too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that really covers pretty much all of the news that we had.
Yeah, that
So
only took an hour.
yeah, well, to be fair, it didn't come out until like right before, so we didn't really have a chance to prepare.
Yeah, yeah.
But we have a few things. I have a few questions prepared for you, Scott, and
Okay.
I kind of want to get your thought on these.
All right.
So, first things first. Uh, for anybody else who plays any other MMOs, you'd know that Final Fantasy 14, the Dawn Trail expansion, just came out. And that game has a very different way of going about like storytelling and questing than WoW does. And we Scott and I have talked about this before. I don't think either one of us really cares too much for the story in these games, really. And the way that the story is portrayed in Final Fantasy is almost more of a slog for both of us.
Uh-huh.
And the way that the story is portrayed in WoW, like I love the WoW story and the WoW lore stuff, but I almost like that more from the things that I read and learn outside of the game. Like I feel like the way that they do the storytelling in the game is a bit rough. So, really, I guess the question that I have is coming from that in Final Fantasy and knowing that we're about to go back into another expansion in World of Warcraft, like what is there to be done about storytelling in these games? Or do you think it's pretty much just like a sealed deal where it's like, this is how it's going to be? And, it is what it is.
Yeah. I think there needs to be lore and story so you know why you're in a place to kill a guy. Um, I think that's essentially it. Like, we need to know who Arthas is because Arthas is the bad guy and we want to kill him. So we need to know who he is and we need a general outline of his story. I don't think I think the game should tell a lot of environmental storytelling. And like, I actually like certain quest lines in WoW do a really good job of this, is that like telling a kind of a mini contained story within the larger story. And I think Dragonflight does this as well. You just kind of don't pay attention to it because you're like me and rushing through and not reading the quest text. But I think there should be like world building in the environment that, like, this place, this is why this place looks like this is what you would like to accomplish in this place, and this is why you're going to this raid zone. Because I think the cool thing about raids in this game is like this feeling of like we're breaching into this castle or this fortress or whatever, and like going to take down the big bad of the area, and we need to know why that person is bad, and why it's good that we cut their head off. But that's really all I need from story. Like I run a couple other podcasts that spend a whole lot of time talking about story. I love story. Story is very important to me, and I play a lot of games that are just like games that I play just for story. I have never really needed that in these games, and you're right. Like a lot of people really, really like the storytelling in Final Fantasy 14. I never have. I never have, and I know like it's the cool thing right now to say the Dawn Trail story is bad. Um, I'm over here like, but it's the same as all the other games. Like this is the way it's always been. It's not entirely true, but close enough. Um, I find the way that Final Fantasy tells its story is very clunky and weirdly paced, and often very difficult to get through. And I don't need it. Like the reason I try that game out is not because I think the story is this incredible, amazing thing. And occasionally it is. Like occasionally they do a good job of in Final Fantasy of doing exactly what I'm talking about here, which is like I need to know where what's happening in this place and why that person's bad and why I should feel motivated to stop them, and that's all I need. There's moments in Final Fantasy, like largely thematic moments, that I'm like, I like what you're doing here. I thought the last expansion, Endwalker, talking about the feeling of hopelessness in a cruel, uncaring world, and how you react to that, and what the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do when you have this feeling. I thought thematically that was a cool, interesting idea. I thought the way they executed the beat to beat storytelling of that was some of the most boring things ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, ultimately, I feel like I have other games for story, and I play these games to play with my buddies, and to storm a castle and kill the dragon in the castle, and all I need to know is why dragon bad.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So when it comes to MMOs, I don't generally care too much about the story at all. Like, and I get that I'm in the minority here, I think, to be honest with you. I think that honestly, both you and I have minority opinions in this, and
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. The biggest thing for me is though, is like when I am going through and I'm playing WoW or I'm playing Final Fantasy, and like the cutscenes I'm watching are the ones that are voice acted
Mm-hmm.
typically.
Sure.
And so like in Final Fantasy, you have so many, like they're essentially cutscenes. You just click through them, they're text. Um, those I just pay no attention to. I don't like reading, which is probably why I guess it's not that I don't like reading. I don't like reading in these games because I like reading books. So
Yeah,
I don't know. It just feels weird.
when I sit down in front of a computer and put my hands on a mouse and keyboard, I'm doing that because I want to press those buttons. Like I
Yeah.
want to play. I want to play the game. And like WoW, I feel like does a lot of cutscene storytelling now these days too. Certainly not near as much
Mhm.
as Final Fantasy, but like it's like the popular thing amongst the content creators now to like look at the latest WoW cutscene and be like, "That's it. This is the whole story. This sucks." And it's like, well, I don't think they actually mean for this one cutscene to be the whole story. It's like after the patch comes out, you boot up the cutscene on YouTube and like, what? That's the whole thing? It's like, no, it's supposed to be the environment. It's supposed to be everything else around it, and that's just like one little capper. But I do think WoW relies on those cutscenes too much, because the ones that were good, people liked, and so they leaned into it, and now we're in the situation we are now. Like the concept of having a cutscene at the end of a raid was not a thing until
Mhm.
Lich King, right? Like you didn't get like we killed the boss, now a cutscene's gonna play until Ice Crown, and that's because it was fucking Arthas, and so like it seemed to fit in that moment. But now we've just kind of decided that's where it's the expectation that you kill the final boss or raid, you're going to get some sort of story cutscene after that. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, of course they're disappointing because it's like 2 minutes of video at the end of this long raid you've done.
Yeah, after hundreds of wipes on a
Yeah,
boss
yeah,
potentially. Yeah, I don't know. My biggest problem that I have and why I think that I can handle the questing in WoW a lot easier than I can handle a lot of the questing in Final Fantasy is mainly because the way that it's done. Like, sure, all of the quests are just like go talk to this person, go pick up these things, go kill these guys, go loot these things, come back. But in Final Fantasy, you're like a whole part of the game is just ignored while you're questing, essentially. The entire combat system might as well just not exist because you just don't kill anything until they force you into a dungeon or they make you just kill two random mobs and then come back and talk to somebody else.
yeah.
I think that's why it's so hard for me in Final Fantasy. But I guess retrospectively, I don't really enjoy questing in WoW either. So, like, it doesn't really matter that like one game I like it less than the other is I don't I get the point of questing in MMOs, but I don't ever really pay attention to the story in MMOs, and maybe that's a oh shame on me kind of thing, but it's just not why I play them. I almost exclusively play MMOs like you said to play with my friends, do end game stuff.
Yeah.
And in Final Fantasy, you can't do that until you finish the story. And in WoW, you can, but not really. Like you have to finish the story and reach max level before you can really play with your friends, like outside of just doing leveling content.
Yeah.
So
I think the main story quest in Final Fantasy in this newest expansion is the nadir of questing. It is the worst implementation of 20 years of iteration on what questing in an MMO looks like. Because back in the old days, there were no quests, and all you leveled up by you killed mobs, and you went to a spot, and you just killed things over and over and over and over again, and got little piddling levels of experience, and you stacked those up long enough, and then you got a new level. And then World of Warcraft came and it introduced the concept of quests, and everyone loved it because grinding mobs is not fun, but having a set number of mobs and having little incremental goals that are funneled to you via questing is fun. And we iterated on that process again and again and again, and we put more story in those quests, and we changed up the type of quests, and it wasn't just kill 10 things, it was also go to this one place and do a thing. And we've iterated on this again and again and again, and in good ways and bad ways. And here we are in 2024, and the Final Fantasy quests are objectively terrible. Like just awful. Like when you are running a quest and wishing you could be collecting 10 boar livers right now, something has gone wrong.
yeah, it really it's a shame though because like it's something you're forced to do to play this game that I think both you and I would agree has honestly a pretty decent end game. Like it's fun, it's flashy, it's got catchy sound. Like I think generally you and I would enjoy the end game and the stuff that we do with our friends in Final Fantasy
Yeah.
just as much as we do some of the content that we do in WoW. It's just it, it's a slog to get to that point, and honestly, it's a slug to get to that point in World of Warcraft too. But we've been playing it for a lot longer and know how to, I guess, really maximize our time getting through all of the chaff in that
Yeah,
game.
but I think there's a difference between the slog of, oh, I got to go kill these things again. I got a new set of quests that's gonna have me run around killing stuff mindlessly, versus, oh, I got a new quest that's gonna have me run back and forth between two places to watch 5 minutes of cutscenes at each one of them. Like those fundamentally feel different as a game player, and I prefer the former much more than the latter. Although, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I like it. There's this interesting thing for me where I feel like the game would be forever damaged if you just cut that part of the game out of it. Like, I don't want them, the worst possible news to me would be World of Warcraft announces, hey, we realize nobody likes quests and questing, so we're just not going to do it anymore. You're just going to start the expansion at max level, and then you're going to go into, like, maybe you'll have like the world events you can fly around and do for fun, or you're just going to go into like, I think that would be ultimately detrimental to the game, because again, the environmental storytelling, the quests allow you to create a place that can tell a story indirectly as you journey through the place. I think that is important
Yeah.
and it matters. And while I didn't think the writing in Dragonflight was particularly like great, I thought the zones were cool, and progressing through the zones was an interesting experience in and of itself. So I don't know. It is a weird place where like the meta in MMOs is definitely like the end game is the only thing that matters. Like that, it has been that way for a decade now. And is that something that should be actively looked at and fixed? Some people think so, some people don't. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't envy game devs at all right now, especially people who need to be making these decisions, because it's not easy to please everyone, right? Like I
Mhm.
said, you and I are definitely in the minority here, I think.
Yeah,
So
we probably just pissed
us
off some
complain.
Final Fantasy fans.
Yeah, well, we probably just pissed off a lot of people. I'm sure there's a lot of people in WoW who are like, "Wait, you don't read the lore?" It's like,
I think
yeah, sorry.
there's much less of those people. Here's the thing though. I like the WoW lore. I watch those novel videos every once in a while
Yeah,
to catch up on. I think it's in some ways interesting. It hasn't been great lately, but like I'm an old school Warcraft player. I've been playing Warcraft since the first game on PC. My uncle gave me that game and showed me how it worked, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so I've been like invested in the story of Warcraft since 1993, um, when I was 8. So like, it's not as if I completely don't care about these things. I just on the list of things I care about, it's much further down than just about anything else.
yeah. Well, I unfortunately I don't think that there's much that's gonna really need to happen here. Like I said, I, I- people like exactly what we're talking about for the exact reasons that you and I don't like it. So I don't necessarily think that something needs to happen here, but I did want to get your thoughts on it just because we are so close to having to do it again. You know, you and I are either have done or are doing the Final Fantasy story currently.
I'm
So,
done. Thank the
um,
Lord. Thank the Lord. I am done with it.
I am not yet. But so another thing that kind of ties into this, and we haven't really talked too much about specifically, is this next expansion. I don't know if it's been confirmed or if it's just been data mined, but there's a new raid difficulty, story mode essentially for the raid.
Hmm.
And I don't know what it is, really. I don't know if you have more information on that, but it makes me feel like the the reason for this is for people who want to be able to experience the raid and be able to experience that like storytelling, but we already have LFR as well. And so I'm not 100% what this is. Is it a way for them to get their like NPC dungeon stuff happening in a raid maybe? I don't know.
I don't think they've really expanded upon exactly what it is. I think from what I've seen, it's supposed to be like a single player raid experience. You don't kill all the bosses. You don't do all of the raid. I don't think you just do maybe the key story moments of the raid. So I'm of two entirely different minds of this whole thing. I think it is good that everyone that plays this game can experience the content on the difficulty level that is appropriate for them. I think that is
Hmm.
a good thing. I also think there are too many fucking raid difficulties in this game. And how can I think both of these things at the same time? I don't know, but I do. Um, I think it is incredibly, like, as a person who came back to this game in the middle of Shadowlands, I, I was kind of immediately overwhelmed by the fact that, well, how many raid difficulties are there? 4. Okay, that's a lot. Do I have to do them all? No, but maybe. Um, it just seems like it's a lot, and like I feel like ironically, the victim of these difficulties is normal mode, which is just the base one supposedly, is almost entirely irrelevant. In
Yeah.
like maybe these guilds exist out there, but I can't imagine there exists a guild that was like does normal and then is like, all right, we're good. Like I think there are people that do LFR and are like, yeah, we're good. And those are people probably that don't have a guild or don't have enough people that can just click a Q button, pop in, kill the raid, and be like, yeah, I did it. I cleared the content. But like normal is so easy in the game now. It's so easy. Um, that I just don't think it would be fulfilling. Like the amount of organization it takes to get a group of people together, like it's too easy for that. For like if you do that much work to get that group together to go into a raid, it's like you're not. It's more effort than it's worth
Yeah.
for normal mode, and
It's
that feels
well,
weird to me.
yeah, I definitely think that we have too many raid difficulties. And I don't know how they solve that because
I
on the
don't
other
think they
hand,
can.
yeah, I do wish that we had some higher level raid difficulty that wasn't locked to 20 players too. Um, but again, discussion for a different day, probably. Uh, yeah, I don't really know how to feel. I'm right there with you. I think it's good that people can experience the story. This is one thing we talked about a little bit last week, but like story is separate from like rewards. Like
Hmm.
everybody should be entitled to understanding the story and what's going on, but I don't think everybody should be entitled to the best end game gear, right? Like you should have to do difficult content to get the best loot in the game,
Sure,
for example.
sure.
Story is not the same way. That like you shouldn't be forced to have a heroic raiding guild to experience the end of the story that all of the work you've done to this point is culminating to, right? So I don't know. I'm hopeful that it will just be a single player thing and they'll be able to like figure all of this out and it won't be too much of a big deal. But it is something that's kind of right there with the storytelling where it's like if we are doing this, um, what else is coming with it? Like is it just the story? Are you getting anything else? Stuff like that, you
Yeah,
know? Um,
I will say that I love this game deeply. I think this game is wonderful. LFR is the least amount of fun I've ever had in this game in my entire life. Like, even when the raid goes smoothly, it's not fun because
yeah.
it's nothing. It's nothing. It's essentially like killing world bosses in this game, except it takes longer. And it's just like,
And you can have somebody troll.
yeah, and then occasionally you die and you're like, oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. There's
It's
no worse feeling than loading up the game and going into LFR and hey,
yeah.
welcome to Razagath,
Yeah,
guys.
but again, like it's not going to change. Like I think it is very difficult once you have introduced a difficulty level to take that away. I think the only thing, like, but like this is this is a very new player unfriendly game at this point, and I guess the question is, does that ultimately matter? Like when you have a business meeting about World of Warcraft, how much are you talking about attracting new players to your 20-year-old game versus retention or returning players, right? Like I feel like the new player segment is just one that, yeah, you would love if you got some new people to come play the game, but it's not the primary focus of your time and money.
Yeah. It's also going to get harder and harder
Yeah.
and already has.
The game's
Like,
20 years
it-
old. Like look at I'm
yeah,
old. I'm old. I'm old as shit. And I've been playing this game since it came out. So like
yeah.
imagine getting a Gen Alpha kid to play this fucking old man game. No. No, it's not going to happen.
The hardest part is like even if the game wants to be approachable for new players, the more and more that they add to make players stick around, the more and more they're adding to make players stick around. So like The game is ultimately always going to have more content. Like retail will have more content than classic,
Yeah.
always.
Hmm.
And vanilla, while it was approachable, despite it being like hard and stuff, because there, it was easy to lay out what you should be doing. Um, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's always going to get harder because of just the way of keeping people around. Like explaining to somebody a talent tree and then explaining to them, oh, but there's this other talent tree, hero talents. It's just like,
Hey, explain to
why?
someone the upgrade system. Go.
Yeah. Well, what one? Are we talking about flight stones or valor stones or Drake's crests or aspect crests?
So,
What can you tell me the order of crests currently in Dragonflight?
Whelpling,
Uh-huh.
Drake, Worm, Aspect, right?
Okay, okay.
Nailed it. Nailed
But
it.
will the new player know that?
No.
You know that because of the playing it for so long.
So,
It feels weird that it isn't staying the same. Like why are flight stones going to valor stones? Why are crests changing names not only between expansions, but like why are we changing names of shit between patch cycles on things that are already super convoluted and confusing?
yeah, I don't know. Like, and don't get me wrong here. I think the upgrade system is like one of the greatest ideas they've ever come up with. I think it's really, really
Oh
cool.
yeah, for sure.
I think it is incomprehensible. And the genius of it from a development standpoint is once you get into the game and start tinkering with the system, it becomes very, very understandable and easily parsable. But like trying to explain, like I remember the weeks leading up to season 2 and the number of videos I watched where content creators were like desperately trying to get you to understand how this thing works, and I'm just like, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. It is an insanely difficult thing to understand, and like I said, once you get into the game, it becomes very obvious and very transparent, and it works perfectly. But it is one of those incomprehensible things, and this is like a thing that I think is a problem for the game. I do remember, like in the moments in the time leading up to me coming back to the game, there were moments where I considered dipping my toes back into WoW. Like Legion was a big one where I considered, oh, this is the Burning Legion. Like I said, I like Warcraft storytelling, and I was like, oh shit, the Legion's back. This is gonna be cool. Um, and then like you spend like 5 minutes reading about all the systems and things, and it's just like I am never going to be able to understand this. And like a person who's been playing the game of course does understand it because they've been having to interact with these things, and as you said, they were added incrementally over time. So like I've mastered these 4 things and then they add a 5th thing. It's very easy for me to now learn this new thing, but for a new person I've got 5 things to figure out now, and that just extrapolates over time and becomes ridiculous. Like I don't know, like I say this is a problem. I think it's only a problem if like you're desperate to try to bring new people into the game, and I just don't I just don't
Yeah.
know if they are anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, the really the only other hard kind of question that I had that I wanted to touch on for today, and this might take us honestly up until the end at this point, is we have a guild in Classic, and we are starting to get our guild ready for retail. We're
Mhm.
coming off of, starting our own guilds here. So the thing that I'm noticing is in Classic, and when I say like starting a guild, I mainly mean more so a raid team than
Yeah.
a guild itself. Uh, it's so hard because you have this like strict 10 players can go into the raid, or you can do 20 man. And it's like, okay, or 25. I don't know what it is in class. It's
In Cata
25,
it's
right?
25. Yep, yep.
Yeah. So you have 10 players or 25 players, nothing in between, nothing below. That's it. You get these two numbers. You must field that many people and you go. So this is one of those things where, like you were saying earlier, the game has just gotten better. Like flex rating is solving so many of the problems that we are running into in Classic right now. Where it's like we have a roster, if everybody showed up, of like 12 people, but we are still struggling to get 10 people
Mhm.
most days. And so it's, if we were able to recruit up to 15, then that would be awesome. But now if we recruit up to 15 and we're fielding 10 people, the remaining 3 people who are not getting to go every week are just going to leave, and now we're back down to 12, and
Yeah.
now we're not making, so like it's just this constant cycle of like, what do you do? And I think that guilds run into this in Mythic in retail, but since we don't have to interact with that, we don't really know too much. I just I don't know how you solve that outside of the flex rating solution, and I'm honestly looking forward to flex rating because it's going to solve all of these roster issues.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time you and I have done this ever. Like I've been part of guilds and I've been in leadership in guilds before, and I know you have as well, but not like
Mhm.
we've never been the guy. And it's impossible, and frequently frustrating because you're right. We're at a place right now where we are stuck. We could recruit new people. I guess we could. I'd have to lie to them and say that yes, you're definitely going to get a spot in raid. That's not true. You're like you might maybe if people don't show up, but like I don't have a free spot for you now. Would you like to be recruited for my bench? It pays nothing, and you will get no benefit of it, but I could perhaps call upon you if I need you. Would you be willing to submit to that idea? No? Why not? What's wrong with you? Yeah, I think flex rating is one of the greatest ideas this game has ever come up with, and it is the reason why we were able to get AOTC in every tier that we've done it since I came into this game. Because yeah, life is tough, and sometimes shit comes up, and we would have raids where we had 22 people, and we would have raids where we had 11 people. And it happens sometimes. And the idea that you have to either call it or pug or just try to deal with the roster boss, as they call it, because life happens is really, really frustrating. It's one of the reasons why I just generally enjoy Mythic Plus more, is because 5 people is so much easier. 5 people is still hard, by the way. Getting all 5 of you to have days where you have that you can all play at the exact same time and is extremely difficult. um I don't know how they solve this. Like I think what people are hearing right now is our frustration that we haven't advanced in Cata rating as fast as we hoped we would. And it's been mostly because
True.
in the 6 weeks that we've been rating, we've had a full complement of 10 people twice,
Mhm.
maybe. And hey, we killed heroic bosses every time. Every time we had all 10 of us, heroic bosses died. It's magical. It's almost as if that's the key to success for us. Yeah, I mean, ultimately I don't know the solution because like I hear the argument for why they say Mythic is locked at a certain amount of players. Um, because the scaling sometimes doesn't work very well, right?
Yep.
Like there are break points. There will always be break points, and there will always be points when, just because of the design of the boss, it is much easier for X number of players than Y number of players. Like that's always going to happen, and they're okay with that in the normal and heroic levels because they are not the upper echelon of the raid. This is not designing on the edge of a knife like Mythic raid is,
Mhm.
and I get that. I get that. But yeah, I really want to kill Cata bosses, and it is really frustrating that like I feel like there's just nothing I can do at this point. If you're
Yeah,
listening to this and you want to sit on the bench of my guild and maybe come in on a Saturday, uh, hit me up.
yeah, the I don't know. Like I said, the biggest thing, or I guess like you said, the biggest thing is just like life happens, and we wholly understand that. So it just sucks that, you know, it's just so hard to get 10 people together. I mean, that's really the end all be all. There's not really much else
Yeah,
to say about it. The main thing that I just wanted to hammer home is, we've said it before, and I know that there's a lot of people out there who would disagree with us, but like the game has gotten better over time. Like Mist of Pandaria is what brought in flex rating in Siege of Orgrimmar, and it's been a game changer ever since. Just like when Legion brought in Mythic Plus, man. Like these systems that allow you to play the game without having to be constrained as much are just night and day differences when it comes to things that they've introduced. So I hope that maybe one day there will be something that we can look back on and be like, oh, they really knocked it out of the park here. They solved this issue. But I I currently don't think that there's a way that they're going to be able to go about it without it being super frustrating, I guess,
Yeah.
for not only themselves but some guilds.
It's really
So,
funny because before Cata Classic, I think one of the things that you and I said the most was they need to make Mythic 10 man. If they did 10-man Mythic, we would fucking do Mythic. And now I'm not even sure if we could do 10-man Mythic
yep,
because it is such a challenge even 10 people. It's such a challenge, and we're new at this, and we're still building and bringing in new people, and I fully believe a year from now we will be able to do that. If Cata was released a year from now, we would maybe be struggling less with this than we are now. It's because we kind of had to try to build this thing and put it together at the same time as it was coming out. Expecting to have immediate success in the first year was perhaps too
ambitious.
aggressive, ambitious. Yeah, there's the word.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I think rating in this game is really cool. I don't think any game does rating quite like this game does. It's very unique and fun, and I tend to really enjoy it, and I want to do it more. And it's frustrating when the thing stopping me is being able to manage a group of people and getting everyone together, and yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Like when we were kids, this was easier. When we had nothing going on, when it
yep.
was I remember I played this game a lot, like the summer I was in college, and it was like the summer between classes, and I had a job. But my job, like I worked at Sears as a stalker. And so like I would go in the morning and do that. And then I just had nothing to do. It was summer, nothing to do. And it was after work, what am I going to do? I play this game. And like I had a group of people that were all my age in our guild. And hey, no, we all had nothing going on.
Hmm.
That is not the case for the majority of people that play this game anymore. And they've been
Yeah,
very good at adjusting to that, but there is this thing that still exists, which is I mean, and like yeah, there's no it's not solvable because like there's always going to be a number. Like even with flex rating, you got to have 10 still, right?
yeah.
Like you still
There's
have
still a
to have
minimum.
10. So there's always going to be a number, a minimum number, or a specific number that if you don't have that number, sorry, you're out of luck. Um I don't know. I don't know. It's just more like a venting frustration that it is like this is a problem that needs to be fixed. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I don't think either one of you would, or either one of us would have the solution, nor do we think that there needs to be a solution to it. It's really just frustration.
yeah, yeah,
And like I said, just knowing that we can have 15 to 20 people on our raid team in retail that we can't in classic is nice. Like
yeah.
knowing that we can go into raid with 13 people instead of 10 people or 13 people instead of 20 people is nice.
Mhm.
It's just to have a range is easier to plan around than to have a set number. So again, it's just a ranting, but it is something that that's different between the games, and we play both, so it's hitting us in both sides.
Yeah, I really like Final Fantasy's 8. I like that number. Eight's a good number. We would be
8
set
is a
with
good
8.
number, but hell, we had problems with 8 in Final Fantasy, so
True, true. But I don't know, like we had problems with 8 because we were sticking to our group of friends. We didn't really try to recruit outside of that
that's
at
fair.
all. And I feel like if we had I don't know, in my opinion, Final Fantasy was always this thing I was playing between WoW patches, so I wasn't as committed to success there. I enjoyed it. It was fun to play with people, but it's always been the number 2 game in my if I'm
Mhm.
playing MMOs, it's number 2.
Yeah, so I I know I said that that might be our last question, but looking, we might have time for just a little bit more.
Okay.
I do have a fun question for you. I
Okay.
posed it to you the other day, but I didn't really have you elaborate too much. So, the add-on situation in Final Fantasy and WoW is handled very differently. And in WoW, you can have as many things in your game as you want. You can have weak auras doing this, UI add-ons doing this, boss mods telling you all of this stuff, and just like add-ons, 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 add-ons. And in Final Fantasy, it's very much so of the opinion that like a damage meter is probably okay. Just don't tell anybody you have it. But outside of that, don't really use a ton more add-ons. Maybe like a UI overhaul. But again, it's on the like hush hush. So in WoW, if you had to pick one add-on, and I'm gonna overrule weak auras because weak auras can do everything. You had to pick one add-on. What would it be?
Well, like then the answer is LVI because it can do everything else. Like between weak auras and LVI, you've got everything. But that's a boring answer too. So, um, I feel like the answer is just like bigwigs or DBM. Like I feel like getting to know boss timers and getting to track that stuff, and especially as a healer, like I don't understand how you are a like a non-reactive healer, a preventative healer, without being able to track boss timer stuff. Without knowing when to build your ramp and getting that kind of real feedback and that kind of stuff. I don't know how you do that. So I feel like those add-ons are very good and, and very effective. And one could make the argument that that is a type of add-on that should be baked into the game, that there should be timers baked into the game itself. I don't think they're ever going to do that because I think Blizzard's attitude with add-ons is they conflict with the storytelling and realism, quote unquote, of
Yeah.
the game. So to have a built-in set of bars with timers on it for each of the boss's abilities would not fit in with like the role playing of we are a bunch of heroes here to kill this bad guy. That would feel too gamey to them, and I don't think they would include that. But also, they have this wonderful situation where they're like, well, we don't have to because somebody else has already, and most people use it, and they're fine with that. I think add ons are good. I think being able to customize your game experience is good. I think it's beyond stupid that I could pull up a Final Fantasy 14 stream right now and not be able to see how much damage those people are doing because of this stupid rule about add-ons in that game. I think that's dumb. Literally every one of the streamers is right now has ACT sitting on their screen and they're looking at it as they're doing damage. They all have it. They're just not allowed to show it on stream from stupid reason. That's dumb. That's dumb. Um, I think there is, of course, a limit to this stuff that, and there should be. Like, I know I wasn't playing the game at the time, but I know Weak Auras got kind of out of control with some of the stuff that they could do for you on some boss mechanics, and it's been this constant battle. I know all that, and I agree with the general sentiment that that is a battle that needs to be waged. That Blizzard does not need to just give up on that fight and let you do whatever. I haven't experienced the weak aura phenomenon a lot, or that the private aura phenomenon a lot, because I think the difficulty of a lot of those private auras is mostly locked behind Mythic.
Yep.
Um, but they're putting those in Mythic Plus in the next expansion, so I guess we're gonna experience that. I mean, I think it is cool that there exists boss mechanics that are randomized to the point of thing happens, the group has to collectively recognize that thing happened, react to it, and you don't quite know who's going to have to react and do what. I think that's cool. I do think oftentimes, as a way of turning up difficulty, they decrease the amount of time you have to successfully react to that kind of thing, to the point where that it gets absurd. And of course, you're going to use a weak aura that handles
Yeah,
that
you need a
assignment for
timer.
you because it's just
Yeah.
too fast. It's just too fast. I don't know. Did that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and so in theory, I agree with you. Because it's not fun to say like, another one that I would say is like method raid tools or something like that. But again,
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing that like LVI, like weak auras, it does a lot for you. And boss mods is very targeted on very specific stuff. Another one that I could see, like I feel like we should have in the game is Omni CC. Uh, it just knowing that somebody either has a defensive, or let's just say you use it only for kicks, only a kick tracker, knowing somebody has an interrupt for something or not. I I think that that's invaluable information. But again, if you're playing with a group of organized people, you can communicate, right? So
Yeah.
maybe that loses a lot of value there. So yeah, I think if we're overruling LVI, we're overruling weak auras, and we're overruling um, method raid tools. It's got to be big wigs for me as well. It's way too important to know the way that WoW bosses are set up and spell queuing and stuff like that. Like just knowing what's coming next is super important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that has to be the answer.
The game was designed around that fact, right? Like this is the idea that like you can look at a game like Final Fantasy 14 and be like, "Oh, look, they don't have weak auras. They don't need boss mods." And it's like, yeah, they don't need boss mods because the fights are heavily scripted and things happen in a certain order, in the same order every time, and part of the challenge of the fight is learning that dance and knowing how to successfully do the steps necessary. And by the way, like I'm not admonishing that. I think that's a fine design, and Final Fantasy fights are very, very challenging. I struggle with them a whole lot. I'm not saying it's like easy because the same thing happens every time. Certainly not. And there is some randomness built into those encounters as well. Um, but you know the order, and part of the progging on the fight is memorizing the order. That is not
Mhm.
how things work in World of Warcraft. And so you cannot, it's apples and oranges. Like you would have to fundamentally shift how you design raid bosses in World of Warcraft. And I think raid bosses in World of Warcraft are pretty fun. Not all of them. Some
Yeah,
of them suck, but I
Sargrath.
think they're, yeah, I think they're pretty fun. Um so yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Final Fantasy compared to WoW, just in general, doesn't work 95% of the time.
Yeah.
It's just Yoshi P and the Final Fantasy team has way different design philosophies
Yeah.
than Ian and the WoW team, and that's fine. That's
And
why both games exist, and one hasn't just completely beaten over the
yeah,
other.
I love that both of these games exist, and I love that we have both of them. Um, you know, I don't know if we want to get into this whole thing, but like, I don't like trash in my raids. However, I also don't like the Final Fantasy 14 raid design that it's just 4 boss rooms that don't even like tangibly connect to each other in the world, that it's just like you go through a portal, you're in a boss square, you go through a portal, you're in a boss circle. I don't like that either. It doesn't I don't ever feel like environmental storytelling. I don't ever feel like I understand the space I'm in.
Hmm.
I don't ever feel that. And if killing trash is what I have to do to get that feeling in a World of Warcraft raid, I guess I'm going to do it because
Yeah, I mean, like walking into like Castle Nathria, or walking into
yeah.
something in Dragonflight, like a Mirdrasil, and just like seeing everything and
Yeah.
visibly like knowing what you're getting into. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
And like it's a branching path that actually, that like it's not just a branching path and that you can go in this portal. It's like, no, you can see, you can go to that side or you can go to that side and you can approach it a different way. Yeah, it's a completely different experience, and it's an experience that I generally enjoy more. And the trade-off is that, okay, well, we can't just build this place and then not put anything in it and just have you run through emptiness from boss to boss. So I guess you're gonna have to kill some trash. I guess that's fine.
I do think what they should do in WoW is once you wipe on a boss, you respawn at the boss.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. There's like
Like,
that should be universal across the board. In Mythic Plus, there should be a new checkpoint every time you kill a boss. Yeah, they should do that. And that's like, I've heard of like Max and those people talk about like the reason they don't want to do that is because it doesn't fit the lore, or again, like the fantasy role play feeling of the dungeon. There's not like a lore reason for why you would respawn here versus there. So like when they do it, they build like you drop down a pipe or you ride a thing because they want to like it to fit within the world of the game. And I understand that sentiment, but there's like, that makes sense in the dungeon as a normal dungeon. As soon as you've gone into the Mythic Plus system, you've already kind of thrown any kind of realism in the world away. Like you're putting a thing in a thing, and suddenly you have a timer.
Yeah.
Why? Like it's already like abandoned the role play aspects of the dungeon. So yeah, just do that. Just do it across the
Do,
board.
do you like corpse running back to our bodies in Classic Raid?
No, I do not. You know what else I don't like in Classic Raid? Something that I didn't even realize was a thing until I was reminded of it. Uh, you are allowed to release after you die to a boss, but if you do that, then your buffs and cooldowns will not be reset. You have to wait for the boss to reset, and then the system will automatically reset your cooldowns, and then you can release. Didn't
Yeah.
realize that until we were well into the raid, and I was like, hey, why is my army never up again? That's silly.
But well, I do think we are running out of time, Scott.
No
So
way. No way.
um
I could keep going. Let's complain about more things.
so I guess the question that I want to pose to everybody, last week we asked what the best Affix Mythic Plus ever had was and why. My question for you this week is the same question I asked Scott. If you had to pick one add-on, it can't be weak auras, what would it be and why? So you can contact us over at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. Our YouTube is at Yelling Into the Void Wow or just Yelling Into the Void. And Twitter is at Into the Void Wow.
If you are not already subscribed to this podcast, we should be. This is this weird thing, Tevin, where we haven't actually released either of these episodes yet. So, like, you literally, as I'm saying this, cannot be subscribed to this podcast, but that's okay. If you're listening to it, you can. I think I made this same comment last week. I need to work on this. You could find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much everywhere else in the world that podcasts can be found.
Also, please consider rating or reviewing Apple Podcast. Again, each review helps us get more exposure, introduces new people, allows us to make more content like this. And again, same thing on YouTube as well. Comments, like, subscribe, anything like that on the YouTube video will help us get offered to more people in the algorithm.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you for watching. And as always, we'll be over here just yelling into the void.